Filip Hrgovic did this interview with Box Nation where he talked about how this fight with David Adeleye came about, what the process was that led up to it. He said that he was actually offered a couple of other fights, one of them being against Martin Bakole. Presumably he was offered this by maybe Turki Al-Sheikh, Frank Warren, maybe. And Hrgovic claims that Bakole turned the fight down, that it was put forward somehow, but when Bakole was told about it, or his team, Billy Nelson, whatever, they said no thank you. And Hrgovic then proceeded to call Bakole fat and ugly, for good measure. There's been talk about Bakole and Hrgovic fighting for years. Billy Nelson has claimed that Hrgovic hasn't wanted it in the past. I'm not an insider in this situation, but I would tend to suspect that Hrgovic is telling the truth here. I say that because I think Bakole has lost a lot of confidence due to his last two performances against Joseph Parker, where he got taken out in 2 rounds. Obviously, he wasn't in shape, but still, it happened to him. He lived through that. He experienced that humiliation. And also the very fortunate draw that he got against F.A. Jagba. I had a Jagba winning that fight, I think 7 rounds to 3. Very, very fortunate to get a draw there, Martin Bakole. So I think that's taken a lot of confidence away from him. And I suspect that he and Billy Nelson are really focusing on getting his weight way down before they step back in the ring. And that's going to be a process. If you look at Martin Bakole's physique in the Parker fight, and then again in the Jagba fight, he'd only lost 10 pounds in whatever it was, 10 weeks or something. For a guy that size to only be losing 10 pounds, I mean, what kind of weight loss is he doing, right? In 10 weeks, 12 weeks even, whatever the exact time frame was. I know that if you go on a search engine and say how much weight you're supposed to lose a week, they might say 1 or 2 pounds a week. That's for a normal average person, not for an athlete. I can assure you that for a boxer, only losing 1 or 2 pounds a week is a small amount of weight, particularly for a heavyweight. It's a tiny amount of weight to be losing. You lose a lot more than that. Now, obviously, you need to lose the weight safely. You need to be able to have your energy and all that kind of thing. And that's why I suspect Bakole and Billy Nelson want to take their time in bringing his weight down. And during that process, I don't think they want the most dangerous fights. I don't think they'll be looking for Hrgovic next during that process, depending on the time frame, right? So, yeah, I'm not surprised here if Bakole has turned the Hrgovic fight down. Billy Nelson is nowhere near as vocal about as men as he used to be, given what's happened to him. I was always somebody that was skeptical of Bakole up until maybe the Yoka fight, when I started to see, okay, he's got something about him here. After the Yoka fight, he went on to, beat the likes of Carlos Takam and so on and so forth. I was like, okay, maybe he does have something. Then he fought Jared Anderson, who was green, of course, but he did a number on him. I was like, Bakole's pretty dangerous. He's an interesting addition to the heavyweight division. But it was really up until the Yoka fight, I wasn't impressed. He'd been stopped by Michael Hunter. I didn't think he looked that great against Kuzmin. But he showed me certain things after that made me sit up and take notice. And I still think that version of Bakole, the one who beat the likes of, as I say, Jared Anderson and Tony Yoka, even though those two guys are no great shakes really, at least not at the moment they were at when they fought Bakole, I still think Bakole showed certain things in there for a guy of his size that were unusual. So I think Bakole, his best, has got a lot to offer, but his best may have come and gone, judging by his last 2 performances, potentially. I'm not making that as a definitive statement. I'm saying potentially his best might have been and gone. Yeah, he's officially only in his early 30s. Folks, Riddick Bowe was washed up by the time he was 27. It's a generally held view that heavyweights age more slowly and they can go on until their mid-late 30s and still be world level. Okay, Alexander Usyk is living proof. But there have also been many heavyweights over the decades that were finished by the time they hit 30. Mike Tyson's prime was in his early 20s. George Foreman's prime was in his mid-20s. Joe Frazier's prime was in his mid-20s. Ali's prime was in his mid-20s. These were all guys who peaked long before they reached the age of 30 and were very much on the downward side of things, on a downward trajectory when they reached the age of 30. Obviously, Foreman did very well coming back in his late 30s to become heavyweight champion again eventually, but he had to suffer a few losses. And although he made some technical adjustments when he came back in his quote-unquote second career, he wasn't as good as the young Foreman overall. Wasn't as effective as the young Foreman overall. So, and I already mentioned Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe's prime was in his mid-20s, early mid-20s. By the time he was 27, 28, he was done, you know? So don't assume that just because generally heavyweights age more slowly, that we can't still have some heavyweights around today who are actually finished by the time they hit their early 30s, or are at least over the crest of the hill. I mean, Anthony Joshua was in his mid-30s. He's certainly not in his prime, is he? Looking back retrospectively, Joshua's prime would have probably been in his mid-20s as well, maybe late 20s.